Hi. One of the last films I watched for my 2019 run was Last Breath. It was a documentary I'd heard about at the time it was released, and it cropped up on Netflix, so I gave it a chance. It's based on a fairly remarkable true story of a specialist diver working for an oil company in the North Sea, um, who, during a piece of routine maintenance, wound up trapped on the seabed with only a few minutes' worth of air when the ship to which he was tethered started drifting in a storm, and his umbilical cord stretched, wrapped around machinery, and snapped, completely severing his connection with the diving bell and effectively dooming him. However, after a frantic recovery effort, less than 40 minutes later, rather, he was recovered and, miracle of miracles, managed to make a complete recovery despite having been deprived of oxygen for far longer than should be survivable. Um, he is now alive and well. His name is Chris Lemons, and he's even interviewed in the film. He still works as a diver, and he's shown absolutely no ill effects whatsoever. The film doesn't really go into much greater detail than I have just now. Um, a problem with the film is that the director doesn't. They don't really seem to understand how suspense needs to work. It's implied throughout the early part of the film that Chris actually died. So when he suddenly appears about two-thirds of the way through and is introduced rather dramatically as an interview subject, we're meant to be surprised that he's actually still alive. But I feel that rather than keeping us on tenterhooks like that, what would have worked far more suspensefully would have been interviewing him from the start, talking about his life and his work as a diver in such dangerous circumstances, but making it a mystery of how dangerous it was and how he managed to survive. Um, the other issue is that even though the film is less than 90 minutes, there's simply not enough material. There are very few interview subjects. There is an amount of reconstruction. There is some source footage filmed at the time or filmed as part of other routine dives. But the story itself is focused on an extremely short span of time. The entire story unfolds in little more than an hour. And if the story you're telling took less time to happen than it does to retell, I think there's a problem there, particularly when you're talking to people who are, or have to be by definition, not wild card mavericks. These people need to be steady, safe pairs of hands because this is extremely dangerous work. Rather like the film about Neil Armstrong, First Man. There's not a lot you can say about Neil Armstrong because he had to be a straight arrow. He's not going to be some maverick, hotshot ace pilot. No, they needed to have someone who was right down the line. And it's the same with these immersion divers. So the result is an interesting story, but one that's quite badly told and over a period of time that is poorly advised. Compressing it down to a 45-minute episode of a documentary series would have served the story far better, I feel, because compression really is what the story is all about. And that would have certainly enhanced attention rather than dragging it out and letting the story go on far longer than it really needed to.